I've been doing this for 10 years, and as an activist survivor, and people in this room have known me, and my voice gets heard or not heard or ignored or listened to at different stages all over the world, or seemingly at some point. And you know, to some degree, I've actually got sick and tired of being that lone voice. And I was in Scotland last week with lovely people, had a great time, they looked after me. But I thought, you know, you could make a career of this, and you become the lone survivor professional speaker. And that's not really fair. Because of all the men you've heard on the film today, they actually need to be heard. And this is why I created the concept for this conference, so that people could actually hear more than Bob, which is why Bob hasn't done his usual roadshow and done the take you through my life history, because actually I'm getting fed of going back and having a look, to be honest with you. And I'll talk about other things in the future when I speak. But you have all these amazing people here who have actually given their time for nothing. They've come here to help to pass this message and to let people ask questions to enable you to either get validation for what you're doing or to ask how you go forward, whatever you want to do, and reflect on the day. So please fire away. And if anybody would like to start with the first question, then we'll pick somebody to answer it. You all want to go home? Jim.
Thank you. I suppose it's a question for Sue Hampson, really, because it's about the film that you showed. We saw this morning with the film of the Australian survivors and what they're doing over there. And at the very end of your film, one of the three chaps who has been interviewed alluded to work that he's doing in a project in the Highlands. And I wondered if you could say a bit more about what the survivors up there, both in the film but also perhaps other survivors who weren't featured, how they're taking forward their experience. Because it sounded as though there was some kind of hidden story there about what's going on, if you like, behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think there are varied things going on. Were you talking particularly about Alec, Ronnie and Andy in terms of what's going on for them? Yeah? Yeah. Alec, yeah. Yeah, Alec has moved from the Highlands, but the Highlands Survivors Support Group was set up there, which was to in which they met weekly, and it was for them to support each other and to move forward in terms of talking about what the service provision was like, and to do things like that and support each other. And they met weekly to kind of do different aspects of that. And there were prison visits that went on, and also people being helped to go and go to the correct agencies if they needed more help. So those were the kinds of things they did in terms of a supportive way, and being in contact with each other. That was a few years ago. Alec no longer lives in the Highlands. He lives in Edinburgh now, and he's got his own flat. But there are Andy, who was the person who was with his wife at the end, going through the part. He does a lot and was part of something called M-Line in Dundee, which was set up under the auspices of 18 and under, and they work with people who've been ritually abused in Scotland. And he ran that service for quite a while in terms of phone lines and support for males in the Dundee and Perth area. But people need to move on as well. And Andy was somebody who quite often came on the training to give the perspective of the male survivor. But it got to a point where Andy wanted to move on in his life, and that's why we made the film. And it was about survivors needing not to keep going through it, but they made a film. And Andy now does do talks at the police college, but he's part of a network of people and ran his own conference in Dundee a few years ago. But it's part of a network of people that keep in touch, so it's not such a formal thing as it was at M-Line. And Ronnie is kind of in and out of doing survivor support in terms of different groups in Dundee. So that's those three. There are some other things that are happening in terms of survivors, in terms of Survivor Scotland generally, in Scotland, where people are. There's an active support network there. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Hi, my question's kind of directed more towards Brett and Dave, but please, anyone feel free to chip in. I've worked with survivors of sexual abuse now for a number of years, specifically with men in the last 12 months. And throughout my professional career, I've always been told that you have to kind of distance yourself from it. You're very professional, you're not very emotionally involved. And when I saw Max today, something kind of twigged that that's kind of robotic and maybe that's not the right way to do it. And I was just wondering what your guys' thoughts were on how you'd like professionals to kind of approach you when you're talking. Would you like them to be kind of the backwards where they're empathic but not too involved, or a bit more across the line? Just wondering your thoughts.
I've had male and female counsellors. The first primary counsellor I had was a female, and I very much appreciated her very, very clear boundaries. And she was a bit, but it actually made me feel safe, as though I wasn't being drawn in to something that wasn't safe. So that was really good. Whether that's a gender issue for me, I don't know. I've had a male counsellor as well who's a bit more connected in that way, and I think that's probably what I need from men, is to feel that connection. So I can't really say, yes, I've had both, and they've both been good.
Perhaps I'll answer this by just relating to some of my experiences. So the first counsellor I saw was a female, and it was I was provided with a limited number of sessions, I think 12 sessions. And because we had that limited number of sessions, there was a lot of push and shove to sort of go through the, gambit of the steps you take, go to the police, do this, make a report. I found that it was actually really difficult, especially at a young age, and I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think especially survivors of childhood sexual abuse should be pushed at all. For them, it should be a journey that they take as it's right for them. And I think that's confirmed with all the guys I know, which is probably numbering 40 or 50, that they do things when they can. In relation to Max, I would definitely, I hold him in the highest esteem, and I thank him, and I know there's a whole bunch of guys who are thankful that Max is here, because he just, he does such a great job, and there's just no one that I've ever experienced or known like Max. Whether that can help you or not. I've seen a couple of other counsellors who have sort of been in the in-between, who are very empathetic, but still haven't been as effective as Max. So I hope that can be of some help to you.
No, just from a professional perspective as well, I can really relate to what you're saying, both of you. I think one of the important things is to be authentic in what you are as a person and where you are in your life as well. I think I've changed in my therapeutic approach over the years as I've learnt more and experienced more of life. And I've been on the therapist's couch myself, and that's sort of quite a transforming experience too. So I think it's always a struggle to be authentic as a therapist, and I don't think I think boundaries are very, very important. It depends on the setting you're in. In my setting, I don't think it would be at all sort of acceptable to be as open with our feelings. It's just not the same setting as, say, Max's setting, and I couldn't be a Max. And Max hopefully couldn't be me. So, but I think you respond to authenticity and genuineness, don't you?
Can I just say something? I think my one-to-one counselling regularly in the office is quite different, particularly for the men who I've lived in for 3 days at a retreat. And if I did not hug them goodbye, I would hurt them. So now it's a thing that the men who've been on a retreat who still see me say, once the counselling door's closed, I want my hug. And I can't get in or out without one. And yes, that's the connection and the authenticity, I suppose, that has been part of the stuff of just, that's how I work. And there are certainly other times I would never touch a client. So there's a place, I suppose, and an experience and a life experience you've been through with some of the men that might indicate a different closeness.
Lady with the coloured hair. Are you sure? Who would like to answer that question? Would you like to answer that question, Max?
Look, SACASA runs quite a number of groups. They used to run the women's ones 10 to 12 on a Tuesday, and then they realised they couldn't get anyone to come because actually women go to work too. So when they moved it to a Tuesday night, they had about 17. We'd aim at a group of about 8 to 10 or something. We usually run them for about 8 to 10 weeks. There's also been a therapeutic art group that a PhD student, now a doctor, has been doing in clay or artwork or mosaics and things like that, that we now produce an annual calendar with the pictures of the work they've done. The men's groups we usually run maybe once or twice a year for 8 weeks. It's just a matter of getting enough men to be a group, and there's nothing more painful than 2 of us and 2 of them. So if we've got 8 or 9 or 10, then that's a discussion thing. One year the men said, well, we've touched the edge, we want to go a bit deeper, and the colleague I was working with, we went into a deeper psychodynamic type of model for the second one. But that was that group that wanted that. Yeah.
Dave?
Your question was specific to male survivors, yeah? Like, yeah. I just talked about going to counselling, which is obviously a very individual thing, but, you know, 4 years ago I was in a psych hospital, self-harming, and the journey from there to today would not have happened without Reddy and all the other guys. It's been absolutely crucial. It just wouldn't. You know, I've been to court, been to the police, a whole gamut of things, and every step along the way those guys have all been there. Crucial.
Just I guess on that, one thing I would offer is starting out my journey, I wouldn't have wanted to have just been part of a group straight away. It was a very gradual process of getting to understand, you know, my specific circumstances, what it was like for me, then slowly working my way up to a group. It's not something, you know, we were just throwing into, and I think that's the case for everyone. And more than that, though, the forming of the group is, you know, it's reliant on there being a safe environment. Yeah, so I mean, you know, you just need to, you know, have a safe environment where the guys can feel that they can, you know, tell the other guys in the group, you know, how they feel. So it's really about having a safe and trusting environment to form that group. Otherwise, I don't think it's as effective. So, thank you.
Anyone else?
Can I ask the question?
Sure, yeah.
Because a colleague of mine runs a women's group within mental health services, the survivor group, and there's a male group as well. And they've started to have discussions from the service users themselves about having a joint group. Any experience from